light conditions out there. Um, and power is out on Jefferson. That's where I just came from.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so not sure what's going on here.
Hmm.
So I just want to welcome everyone to the Executive Affairs Committee meeting. As the Vice President of the committee, I'm going to yield my time for that committee to the Finance and Ops Committee, which I would chair today until the President and the Executive Committee meet to disperse and select the candidates for various positions for 2024. So today, Finance and Ops will um, introduce Jim Barnes, and I'll allow Superintendent Williams to do that, to go over the 2024 budget, and that's really critical at this time, and that's why we're yielding that time to Finance and Ops. So, Dr. Tanya Williams, if you want to introduce Jim Barnes.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And Happy New Year to everyone that's on the platform. Everyone knows that we are really at a really critical time. And one of the most important things that we will do as a district, the board and myself and all staff, is really to, manage the financial cliff that we all knew, we would be approaching in July of 2024. We were allotted funds for a certain amount of time to, help with learning loss and all of the things that our children and staff experienced during the pandemic. But we always knew that come June 30th, 2024, that those funds would expire. So tonight, we will have our Chief Financial Officer, and he's going to be talking to us about where we are right now, what we must do, what we've already begun to do, and when all of it kind of kicked off and really goes into high gear. And so I will turn things over to our Chief Financial Officer, Jim Barnes, at this time to begin his presentation on the annual budget process as we prepare for 2024, 2025. Mr. Barnes?
Thank you. Yep, thank you very much, Superintendent, and good evening and Happy New Year, everyone. We're here to talk about the 24-25 annual budget process. Admir, next slide, please. The first slide is just the three goals for the superintendent. It's a refresher, and I do want to make mention of the fact that everything we do in budget is in service to these goals. So these are all in the forefront of all of our minds and planning. Super, do you want to add anything on this goals slide?
I'm sorry, excuse me, I've got a little tickle here, but the three goals that the board has identified for myself and that I'm working with staff for us to be able to meet are really, really important. And sometimes it can feel like finance is kind of a whole separate entity to meeting those goals, but it really is not. It's one of the most important pieces that we have to adhere to help to ensure that we meet the goals. And during this time, it's going to be more important probably than it's been in recent years, at least, that we adhere to everything that we need to so that we can, be positioned to make sure that anything that we have to do will not touch the classrooms. If we're able to do that, as least we can touch the schools, things that directly impact our children. So hard decisions, challenging decisions will have to be made over the next few months. So I just wanted to start, because I always try to start, presentations that we're doing to keep the board mindful that these goals that you set for me are always at the forefront of our mind, and we want to work hard and position ourselves to be able to meet the goals that were set.
Thank you. Andrea, next slide, please. All right, I wanted to start out by clearly stating the objectives for tonight. The 24-25 district budget process doesn't officially kick off to January 29. And it's more important than ever this year that we follow these tried and true procedures for the organization of our size and facing the challenges we are. The budget calendar for the 24-25 budget appears later on in the presentation. Next year's budget process will include the largest financial challenges that we've had in years. We're fully aware of them, and we're making plans to address them. The objectives for tonight are to clearly set the expectations for the 24-25 budget process with the board, to project the financial consequences if the expectations are not met, to outline and quantify the financial challenges faced in the 24-25 year. We've identified, isolated, and know what areas we need to address. We're going to provide a status report on the work to date that we've done on addressing the $90 million loss in funding from the end of our PESR. And then we'll share the 24-25 budget calendar with you. I think this is important to note that all the information shared tonight has previously been communicated per the superintendent to the board, to the cabinet, to school-based leadership, department heads, and the BCS staff, and externally in meetings that the superintendent and I have had with the state, external auditors, and the BFSA, the control board. The external parties, they're important. We view them as partners and resources to use during the regular time, but especially during challenging times. So we keep everyone informed on what's going on. And next slide. At the end of our PESR, we've been meeting prior to the 24-25 budget process kickoff. Teams have been meeting with the superintendent and cabinet leads on the projected cutting of $90 million in expenditures and addressing the 314 FTEs that are within that last year of the PESR budget. We've made presentations to all the principals. That has taken place. Again, the superintendent has, I think, used the word, we can't over-communicate during this time of year and during with the challenges we face. So I think we've done a very good job consistently and thoroughly communicating to all stakeholders. So we've known about the PESR financial cliff for 3 years. Failure to decrease the expenditures and reduce our total budgeted FTE will lead to unsustainable budget deficits and a dramatic decrease in our fund balance within as short a period as 24 months. We put together all kinds of projections in finance to be prepared for or to analyze the changing economic conditions. The table on this slide shows what would happen to our deficits and fund balance if we do not cut the $90 million in our PESR. The first line to take a look at is that yellow line. This is what we call regular operations, surplus and deficits. Last year, 22-20, we had record surplus. In the current year, 23-24, the original budget showed a $37 million deficit. We think that deficit will actually come in lower at about 15 million. Now, here's the key. If we did nothing and just rolled our PESR and all the FTEs and all the expenditures into our general fund, we'd be producing $120 to $130 million deficits every year. And on the bottom line, you'll see that would basically wipe out our fund balance. One other thing to note, and it goes to the complexity of our district. Look at the line that says capital transfers that are not in the 4-year plan. Even in the midst of all these challenges, we're planning and needing to replenish and enhance our physical structure. So we do have in our revised plan almost $27 million in funds that are needed for capital expenditures. Those includes the Da Vinci Buff State project, the commissary, the Fosdick Field land purchase, and some extra funds for All High Stadium Phase 3. So even in the midst of our current challenges, we're confident that we can also fund these types of capital expenditures. But on this slide, what I'm showing you, if we do nothing, we won't be able to do anything and basically run out of fund balance. So that's what's at stake. And the last sentence, if we don't act to cut the projected deficits, the control board, our bondholders, or even the state will intervene to get this done. We are extremely financially healthy, and the state's not going to just sit back and watch those resources wither away, or the control board or our bondholders. So we're going to meet this challenge one way or another. So now let's turn to what we're doing to avoid this scenario. Next slide, please, Andrea. I pulled this next slide. It's called Dealing with the Financial Cliff, the Superintendent's Communication for Financial Wellness. I pulled this directly from the Superintendent's communication to the leadership staff throughout the district. It concisely summarizes our challenges and ends on an optimistic or confident note that we're going to meet them. To quote Mrs. Woods, upon receipt of this, the superintendent's communication, she said it perfectly summarizes the challenges ahead without causing a panic. And that's how the superintendent and her finance team are going about this. So what it says, what the superintendent communicated is, we're approaching a financial cliff. It's going to require us to strategize and prioritize our systems, our practices, and our human capital. We have a $90 million shortfall next year. All BPS schools and departments will need to, over the next 7 months, during the several months over the budget process, focus on the following, just 2 objectives. Decrease your budgets while doing all possible to continue increasing student outcomes. To achieve those 2 objectives above, mindsets will shift. Another phrase I'm borrowing from the superintendent during our planning and discussion. I think that's so important this year. We can get through this. We have to stop saying no to every recommended reduction or cut that don't impact student outcomes. We have to open our minds and go, yeah, I can do this. I can perform this service just a little more effectively and efficiently by tweaking some things. Money and extra of everything is not always the answer. Some examples. We're going to cut non-staff related expenditures, including any one-time building related improvements. You saw the capital items in the first or second slide I gave them, but prior to that, we've spent $70 million over the last 3 years. We've done a tremendous job on our building and facilities. It's enough for right now. All large-scale equipment purchase and numerous contracts for programs developed during BESSER that data reflects are not supporting documented improvements. It'll just stop, and it won't impact anything. We got to significantly reduce the payroll expenditures for summer and extended learning time programs by reimagining those programs. I'll say more about that later. We got to reduce and reimagine professional development opportunities. There's millions of dollars in savings in those areas. We've already engaged, we're in the midst of an internal audit program that will reduce costs while improving operational efficiencies. It's too early to report on anything. We're meeting again with the auditors January 8th for the next steps. I'm confident that will result in millions of dollars in savings. And we have to decrease staffing for future school years to align with our declining enrollment. We need to structurally realign ourselves at the schools. And And then the super ends on a high note. We've been preparing for this time. It's not going to be without challenges, but together, if we work smart and collectively to ensure that these improvements we have seen in our student outcomes over the last several years will continue, we can be successful in these challenges. Before we leave this page, I do want to say from the budget and finance team, thank you, Superintendent. You've taken a direct and active lead. Your many meetings, emails, communication on these and other issues to focus us on the challenges are much appreciated. Edmure, next slide. So this is a bit of a scorecard. How are we doing on cutting this $90 million? There's two issues. One is the non-staff expenditures of about $65 million, which I'll address on this page. And then on the following pages, we talk about what we're doing or where we're going regarding this 314 staff and $30 million that's in our budget. So non-staff expenditures, $65 million are currently in what we call the DC 24 budget. Here's where we are. We got to cut $65 million, first line. I'm going to please skip over the next line. I'll address that next in pink. The third line, the amount cut by cabinet is $32.9 million, already identified and removed. We're meeting on the yellow row with cabinet later this week on an additional $5.9 million. Very confident that will also be cut. That's $39 million cut to date. It's huge and it's a great start. It really is a great start. Now, what are we going to, the blue line, I want to make a note, because nothing in an organization as complicated as ours is a straight line or perfect. In our meetings with cabinet, on the blue line, we have identified about $5.9 million, mainly in IT-related expenditures, that they're saying simply cannot go away. So right now, the plan is to move those into the general fund and either try to offset with other cuts, or that will increase our deficit. But the big remaining outstanding item is 6D, which is after school, 7C, which is summer school, and so about $1.5 million in nursing contract costs to figure out, $21.1 million. This is where the reimagining comes in. The plan to address the $21.2 million, we're having weekly meetings to develop a specific plan and cost reductions for next year. Items for discussions for the summer program include the Say Yes Camp, K-6 summer programs, full day art and music, athletics, CLRI programs, and hub sites for the secondary school programs. We're looking under every stone, and we're going to reimagine and cut costs in that program. Items for the ELT include working with stakeholders and parents, principals, and the CBOs to investigate reducing the days offered from 5 to 4. There's plenty of people that think there's true benefits to that, and again, it doesn't hurt anybody. But it will save us quite a bit of money. And we're actively researching the availability of grants to cover some of these expenditures. So our goal and what we think we can accomplish here is to cut these programs by $10 million without any loss in student outcomes or the services we provide. Next slide. So we're doing really well so far on the non-staff cuts, very well. The second issue with the end of our PESER is that there are 314 filled positions and $30 million in salaries and benefits. This is the trickier of the two issues. We currently have approximately 280 vacancies in the general and grant funds. So a one-to-one swap there, removing all the vacancies in the general and grant funds and moving over the DC 24 FTEs. It's not quite one-to-one. Before I address what we're doing, though, to try and figure out this dilemma, this is the changing of the mindsets. That's this graph. We have an overall budgeted FTE problem, and we've had one for years. It was only exacerbated by ARPS. You see the blue line is our enrollment, the red line is our budgeted staff. It's not enrollment based and it's not sustainable, the budgeted FTE line. So it's like changing the mind, agreeing that these numbers are unsustainable, figure out a way to lower that red line without having any negative impact on the kids in our schools. And here, next slide. So here are some things that we're working on as we try to figure out that our SR-FTE problem. The first and most critical step is we're stopping hiring, a hiring freeze, except for essential positions and only with the superintendent's approval, was implemented about 2 weeks ago for the current year. Job postings are being revised or eliminated. Large-scale recruitment events will not occur. I mention all that. It's one of our tools, but also the changing in the mindsets. You're not going to see the postings or the job fairs. The superintendent has directed HR and budget to analyze current vacancies in the general and grant funds to consider cutting them from the budgets. This could enable our BESSER-funded staff, when possible, to replace these positions in the 24-25 budget. Super has mentioned over and over and directed us, we're doing everything in our power to avoid layoffs. The 24-25 school-based budget process begins January 19th. This is a critical step and an essential first step in our planning for these 314 FTE. The school-based budget process will be data-driven. Remember, enrollments are down over 3,000 the past 5 years. The 24-25 seat projections call for up to 40 less classrooms in K through 8. What that is saying, in part, we're not going to have classrooms with 5, 6, 7, 10 kids in them. We're going to consolidate and produce the same level of service more efficiently. There will not be a funding column for our BESSER in the school-based budget books. No unbudgeted request will be approved. The super will constantly be reviewing that, but no unbudgeted request. Here's the last point I want to address. I've heard several times, oh, you're in such trouble because of the BTF contract. That's not the case, and I'm going to show you numbers a little later to prove that out. But it's really important to understand, and everyone on the board and the BTF knows this, the affordability of the BTF contract was based upon a financial projection that included cutting 160 vacant teacher positions because of the declining enrollments and reducing their overtime extra activity 1/200th by 50%. Those were specifically built in to our cost projections and our decision on whether or not it was affordable. The last point on this screen is maybe our ace in the hole. Over the past 3 years, retirements have averaged over 300 staff members for all bargaining units. Last year, there were 303. We must utilize these retirements and not hire replacements to mitigate any potential layoffs. So a few bullet points on here really clearly outline our efforts to improve the efficiency of the delivery of services, but also to be very conscious of the layoff issue and try to avoid it. And I do want to say that finances never work closer with another department than they are with HR right now. And this whole thing is a tricky situation, but we're confident we can get through it. Here, next slide. Okay, so this next slide, this is what's called the Level 1 budget. It's an important benchmark, but it's not a final budget. It's a pre-budget process what-if analysis. And it condenses about 40,000 lines of data. That's how big our budgets are. But it gives us a little peek ahead of what could happen and what the major obstacles are. I'm going to go through the first column, the 24-25 level 1 preliminary. It shows revenues of $1.085 billion. This is based on what they call the state's November database. It's a projection of what the governor's budget might look like. And we keep all of the revenues flat in this projection. So in some ways, it's a very conservative budget. The expenditures of $1.139 million. This includes all current staff, except for those people in DC 24 with their step longevity and contract increases. This includes the BTF contract increases. Keep in mind, that number does not include any vacancy cuts. But what those two numbers combined show is in blue, a deficit of $53,758,000. That's a reasonable deficit for a level 1 budget. So it's quantitative proof that the BTF contract is affordable, and it's a good starting point. Now, if you go below that, here's the challenges. What we would, if we don't act, what we would add to that $53 million deficit is $22.5 million in ARPESA FTE costs, another $10 million in benefits for those FTEs. All other benefits, they typically increase $4 million or so every year, and charter school tuition will probably increase. Then lastly, the ARPESA non-staff. That's the $27 million that we're currently working on to reduce, or if we could really utilize grants, possibly reduce down to $5 million. But right now, if you just, those are our current issues that we're working on. You add those in to our core operations, we produce a deficit of $122 million. That's the unsustainable number. But we're working on those numbers under the first line. And then there's a line in orange called vacancy cuts in the general fund or grants. No vacancy cuts are factored into these level 1 numbers. And we go to work after the school-based budget process, when we scrub the grants and the job postings and every other aspect that touches on vacant FTEs, we'll make cuts and we'll be putting numbers in there that reduce that deficit. So I hope what you see from here, our core operations, as indicated by that first blue line, that's an okay level 1 deficit. It's how we deal with the remaining $70 million in ARPESA stuff. And we're working on those every day. And next slide, please. As I mentioned earlier, the next step, there's your official budget calendar. You'll notice there's numerous steps. It's a big organization, 5 funds, 40,000, 50,000 lines of expenditures and revenues. So it takes a while. We got to process it very methodically. But the first date I want you to point out is 1/19. That's when the governor's budget proposal initially comes out. And and school aid runs are released. What that means is this is the governor's budget and what that will mean to each and every school district in New York State. It's not the final state budget, but it's our first real indication from the state on what we're going to get in revenues. Everything sort of flows from there. There'll be training sessions. All the departments will enter all their non-staff expenditures. The school-based budget process kicks off. So it goes all the way through to during May when we submit it for approval to the board. And a couple of other steps when you have time to read it. We also have to report to the city of Buffalo. Quite a bit of work, but also that's another stakeholder for us. And just want everyone to be aware of that. But there's your budget calendar. And last slide. So I'll just end with some summary remarks. The preliminary level 1 budget shows a deficit of $122.5 million. Yeah. Prior to cutting vacant positions and projecting lower staff count from not hiring for retirements, and we got some additional work to do on summer and after school. There is much work to do during the budget process to lower that level 1 deficit to more acceptable levels. All staff must approach and I'm going to respectfully say, and the board has to approach the 24-25 budget prep with a new mindset, incorporating the economic realities of the loss of our professor and lower enrollments for the new school year. One other thing that's most important for myself as I monitor our financial strength, from a financial planning and cash flow perspective, there's no longer going to be any substantial vacancy savings. We all remember those issues where we project a budget deficit of $50 million and say, whoop, it's actually a $10 million surplus. It was never solely due to vacancies, but that played a large part in it. What we're trying to do with the shift of our professor vacancies into the general fund is basically eliminate vacancies. There'll still be some in an organization our large, but we can't rely on budgetary savings going forward. There's just no room for unbudgeted requests in the coming year. There's not going to be vacancy savings. Borrowing from the superintendent's letter again, I will end this. We've been preparing for this time, and though it won't be without challenges, together we can work smart and collectively to ensure that the improvements that we've seen in our student outcomes over the last several years will continue. I'm encouraged, but it's going to be hard work. And that's the end of my presentation. So if anybody has any questions.
All right, thank you, Mr. Burns. And I'm going to open the floor to board members. I see one hand up. Let's see who this is. Oh, it's Terrence. I thought it was me, but board member Terrence Hurd, you're up.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Barnes, for your presentation. You gave a very in-depth. Can you hear me?
Yes, Mr. Hurd.
Okay, thank you. You gave a very in-depth analysis about the Buffalo Public Schools direction that we're going in and things we need to progress to as far as programs, as far as understanding, what's needed where, and that's some things that as a board, I think we really have to dig into and find out what's needed where and what programs, whether it's a summer school, after school. I do love the continuity of not cutting any teachers, not cutting any jobs, and working towards that goal. And thank you, Superintendent, for really emphasizing on that. There's a couple of things that I want to ask this about. One is about our reserves. What do our reserves look like after this $90 million cut that we're going to look at next year?
If we're successful in cutting the $90 million and getting our FTEs reduced down to a manageable level, I'll make a projection right now. Our reserves ended last year, just the A fund reserves, $375 million. We will probably have a $15 million deficit this year. $360 million at the start of next year. If we're successful, cutting the 90, reducing the FTEs by 314 vacancies through retirements or some other way, we'll probably have about a $50 million deficit. So that
$50 million deficit means that we have about $310 million left in reserves?
That's exactly right. And that is an extremely healthy amount of reserves.
It is.
Yeah.
It is.
But that's cutting an additional $70 million, which we haven't specifically identified yet.
Okay. So if we don't cut those 70 million, so we're looking more as $210 million left in reserves for the following year. That's not accounting for whatever we're going to receive from the state of New York. One thing that I learned that in my CUBE program that was in Chicago is that every school district should be operating out the red. It baffled me at first when I first heard the concept and the classes that were taught on it, but it says that we're not allocating every dollar towards education in our classrooms, our principals, our teachers, and putting programs in such as after-school programs and working with our students for extended learning. That the district is really failing, and we should be going to the state asking for more money because we're pushing every dollar that we have towards education and not in savings. So listening to that, I would love the board just to maybe think about that idea and see what direction we're going in, because I know that we need savings for special projects and special circumstances. We have a ton of old buildings here in the city of Buffalo, and they always need repair. They always need updating. We're looking for capital planning, to try to keep these classrooms intact. These 100-year-old buildings that's in the city of Buffalo that this district is really trying hard to maintain and keep. It's also because of a hardship on us also, and that takes away from education also. So we really need to look at the city of Buffalo and see what they're going to do with this also. Looking at FTEs and our layout right now is that they need to contribute more towards education than what we're receiving for the past years, and they also need to come to some type of conclusion about how they disseminate their taxes. If they're raising property taxes for the past 2 years and we're not receiving any more funds or monies towards education, it puts us in this stalemate right now where we're battling whether we're going to give programs out to our children or if we're going to look like we're decreasing it in services, for our kids, but trying to keep them the education balance amongst very different type of districts. So I really like to take a deeper dive into this. I'd like to see more line items about how money's been spent with the ESSER funds and the ARP funds and how we can move forward and our projections with our reserves. If you want to comment, I'll give you an opportunity or a chance, but I'm really looking at, we said, looking at nurses. We need all our nurses that's in our buildings and looking at the cabinet, that's something the superintendent can look at and see what's needed where and how we can adjust that. But I really like the protection of our staff and our teachers.
I can offer some initial response, Superintendent. Mr. Herta, I've heard that theory that you talked about. It's applicable in this sense. You're supposed to utilize all the resources you receive, in our case from the state, and suburbs from taxpayers, to properly educate your children, adjust their special needs. We do all of that. It's exceptionally dangerous to ever run your district at repetitive deficits that drain your reserves. The state is not in a position to bail anyone out. Then you would have to do emergency funding, such as bond sales, which can only be supported by the city of Buffalo. It would lead, after several years of that, to financial and operational chaos. Number one, that's just my response. And then two, we're talking about addressing the challenges and maybe some of the excesses and inefficiencies in our system and at our schools. We're not talking about cutting a nursing contract. In that level one budget I provided, it's a $4 million increase in athletics than 2 years ago. It's a $3 million increase in security than it was 2 years ago. The superintendent and this board has invested heavily in the district. We're talking about wringing out excess and inefficiencies, and that does include the classroom.
Yes, yes, thank you, Mr. Brown. I believe in that. I believe in what you said about being data-driven also and moving forward with that. I didn't suggest that we operate out the red, but I was stating that their training is that districts across the country should be close to that level, because every dollar, that tax dollars that's being given to them should be given towards education. And that's how they plausible the classes have went.
And you're correct. I get it.
Okay, thank you, Board Member Hurd. I see Board Member Scott's hand up, as well as Jen McCosey. So Larry, I think I saw yours first.
Thank you, Vice President Evans Brown. And thank you, Chief Barnes, for the presentation. 2 or 3 questions. So if I read or understood your presentation accurately, the cabinet has found a way to save $32 million. Is that accurate?
That is correct. It's cut $32 million from current ARPS expenditures, saying they're not needed anymore. Yep.
And like, can you give us a sense on, that's a lot of money. That's a big savings. Can you give us a sense on what has been eliminated or reduced?
You're putting me on the spot. You're putting me on the spot a little, just memory-wise, but there was a $5 million one-time reading series that in by the Chili Sweat is not needed. It was a one-time shot. There's $10 million in HVAC units for 1 unit on each school. That'll finish that ARPS funded project, and those costs will go away. And then there were numerous cuts to overtime, professional development, 1/200th, all for programs used to fund that learning loss that are no longer necessary. And these board members, or these cabinet members, swore it's not needed. It's not going to give us any more benefit, and we realize we don't have the money.
And you're anticipating that there will be another reduction of about 5 million in a similar way?
Yes.
Okay. And do you know, and it's probably not just a question for you, but do we know, are there other types of programs or any type of things that we've invested in that we can now retract on to save money?
What I can share is that we are really scrubbing everything, and we're trying to streamline. We've been in a position where we've been able to pretty much say yes to almost, everything that principals have felt would move the needle, and directors and folks felt would help with increasing student outcomes. But, we know that we cannot continue it. So for instance, professional development. Right now, we're looking at streamlining how it's offered. Does it always have to be in person for 1-200? Probably not. We've spent a lot of money on technology. And, there are ways that we can, have professional development where we can time if staff are logged on. They have to take a little quiz or something at the end to ensure that they participated. And we've streamlined it now down into 4 areas that we're going to be focusing on, which include Orton-Gillingham. We spent a lot of money on Orton-Gillingham, CLRI, restorative practices, and STEM. We spent a lot of money there. So if we can have those 4 cornerstones as the major areas for professional development, we're no longer just all over, spending millions and millions of dollars, and we're able to really focus it. So that's just one example of how we really are looking to streamline and do things a little differently. We're trying to do everything we can to not have to reduce, a lot of staff. We spent a lot of money on ensuring mental health staff are in our schools for our children. We spent a lot on ensuring that we've been partnering with community-based organizations that have been doing good work with our students. We've spent quite a bit on WASED initiatives. We don't want to now just throw the baby out with the bathwater. We want to continue to, keep these things going. And so in order to do that, we really are scrubbing every single thing that we're doing. And the cabinet, I have to say, they have stepped up to the plate. And, everybody is territorial and feeling like, they're committed to whatever it is, whatever initiatives they put in, but they realize that we're at a time now where, we have to look at things and look at data and see, was this effective? Was it not? Did we do some train the trainer models where we don't have to have the consultants coming anymore? And they really have stepped up to the plate. In order for us to get to $32 million, everybody is really vested in doing all that we can to not decrease student outcomes, but realize that, we got to just be more fiscally responsible.
Thank you, Dr. Williams. My last question, and just it's a priority for me personally that, and I think probably all the board members, that we have sufficient amount of staff that are working directly with our students in the classroom, and that we are trying our best to keep class sizes manageable. That graph or that chart that Chief Barnes showed about enrollment going down and staffing going up, we've seen that trend since I've been on the board, probably even before that. I think it was 2018-19 what that went back to. I'm wondering, and I don't expect you to have the answer tonight, but I'm just wondering if we have tracked or if we can find a way to determine where that growth in staffing has come from. And sure. For example, is it with coaches? Is it in special education, security? And if there's a way for us to also see mental health professionals as well, if there's a way for us to see where most of the ARP funds went to, what type of staff it went to, just to kind of see where the growth is coming from. And I guess just a last comment, if we're at a place where we have vacancies in the classroom, if there is an expectation that we reassign some coaches. I know, for example, if you have a special education teacher, we added behavioral coaches, which were needed. If we have a special education teacher that's acting as a behavioral coach, and now we have a vacancy in the classroom for a special education teacher, could we be considering pulling that coach to now be back in the classroom with our students? So it's, I guess, kind of a lot going into what I'm saying in the question, but just wondering where the growth, most of the growth is being directed, if we have a sense of that, or if there's a way for us to get a sense of that.
I can answer partly. Yes, we can get you that data, but it's so important to view that data within the school-based budgets this year that are truly enrollment-based, more so than ever, and without unbudgeted requests, where it addresses the inefficiencies in the classroom, such as 4 kids in a class. And there's numerous examples of that. But Leonard, to your point, it's got to factor that in. But yes, we can get you that data, absolutely. And I'd be happy to work on getting you that. And your ideas about pulling coaches and putting them in the classroom, I probably shouldn't be editorializing, so Superintendent, I apologize, but that's the kind of change in mindset that the super's been talking about. I don't know if that's good, or the super will decide, but changes in mindset, I agree.
Yeah, we're looking at all of that, and things like equity. So it could be such that we have a school that has few students and very high needs. We're going to be looking at everything. We've got, an alternative school. We know that our children at the school have very high needs. They, we're having difficulty in a traditional setting. So, we've got to look at how that program is staffed, what the resources are that are, in the school right now, and see how we can not decrease if we don't have to for that school specifically, because again, the needs there, that's what equity, really speaks to, giving schools what they need. But we certainly do have lots of classrooms where there are 4 children, classrooms are under enrolled, and we've got to, when we're in a time like this, that practice probably will not be able to continue for the most part.
Thank you, Dr. Williams and Chief Burns. Dr. Evans-Brown, I'm all set.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Board Member Scott. I'm glad you said that, Dr. Williams, because I know that we're not the only district that is facing this cliff. And when we look, we have to do an assessment because we can no longer do status quo. We don't have the funds after September 2024. And so when you talk about, audits of other things, it should also include the audit of the current classroom compilation. So with that, Jen McCosey is next, followed by Terry Duda.
Thank you, Chairwoman Evans-Brown, and thank you, Mr. Barnes, for a great presentation. I was literally waiting, and you just hit it on the nail, Dr. Williams. I was waiting for the equity piece. Where, we're talking about teachers, but I'm wondering, how are we making sure that the schools with high needs are the ones that are going to be addressed where those resources need to be put into place? If it's not across the board, cut every school, I haven't heard, in all of this conversation, I haven't heard how we're really going to look into our high needs schools to make sure that we're resourcing them while also not trying to pull funding. I get the people, I get moving teachers around, I get all of that, but I didn't hear that piece specifically. And you really helped me out there, because I needed to know, how is it, not only the high needs schools, but you have, it's everywhere. All the isms are attacking all of our students and our staff and our buildings and us in our community. So how are we looking to make sure that those resources, with all of the CBOs that we're working with who deal with this on a daily basis, it's how they exist by attacking and approaching these issues? Like, how are we really utilizing folks? I'm
sorry. You can go
No,
ahead.
that was what was getting to me. I'm like, I'm waiting to hear it. I was waiting to hear it. And I know we do it. I would like the public to hear that it's consistent. First thing that we think about, it's in our equity resolution, it's how we operate. We may know that we do that regardless, but the community and I myself as a parent need to know that, if there's a school that has a multitude of programs and they're doing well, not saying they have to be taken, but what programs are not being offered in a school that can also do well and bring them up a bit, kind of trying to raise the bar there. Mm-hmm. So that was my point. And as a representative, not sure if into the new year, depending on what President Belton Cottman decides, but I've been the Teacher Policy Center representative for the Board of Education. And when we talk about PD, a lot of what they concentrate on and what they put their work toward is what PD goes into what, how much money we spend and whatnot. So I'm very interested when all that comes into play, how that looks when we look at PD. I've always had kind of issue with, there were so many out there, but I wasn't sure of the follow-up, and hearing that follow-up is not as intense as I would think it should be for the amount of money we spend and for the fact that it's supposed to exist for our students to receive better, just a better soul in front of them on a daily. So yeah, I'm very interested in Mr. Barnes or whoever when it comes to the PD piece. If you can just shoot me like what you're doing, that would be absolutely amazing.
Sure, we'd be happy to. I just want to say that this process that we're going through is really inclusive. And that's why it was so important, you know, in meeting with Chief Barnes that we get in front of our principals. I'll be meeting with assistant principals even, you know, in January. You know, I'm meeting with community leaders. I had a meeting with Kaz and Dr. Kaban, you know, because, you know, I think it's important that, you know, we get the voice of many. And so we meet with our parent leads every month. And, you know, we certainly want to include them in, you know, how we're moving forward. So this has been a very inclusive. At the end of the day, we may not be able to give everybody every single thing that, you know, they feel that they want and are entitled to, but certainly we want to get their voice. We want to hear their voice. We want to hear what the impact could be from their standpoint and include them in the conversation. So we've been very inclusive.
And that's just something that I needed for you to hear right here, and for the public to hear. For anybody, I don't know if Ben's in there, like, to print it, but we need to make sure that there is effort out there, and these meetings do happen, and we are reaching out to community, and the board's, you know, in training now to make sure we engage with community on even a deeper level. So I just would like to hear more of that in these presentations, because every student is not just a number. They're you know, and every staff member. So that was kind of my point.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Jen. Board Member Schuler, you're up, followed by President Sharon Belton-Cotman.
You know, there's been like so much to think about, and I want to echo what Vice President Scott said about making sure buildings have the support of what they need. There's a couple things. I know that it's a very hard conversation, but we look at Rochester that was in such a deep financial situation, and they had schools that really, they were operating with 200 students. And it's just like, are we going to spend so much money for buildings down the line? That's a long-term thing. I think that it's a really tough thing to take a look at, but I look at the enrollments in some of the schools in my district, what they were and what they are now. And I think like that's one of the things we have to talk about long-term. And another thing, so the positions that aren't filled, that were in the budget, those not filled, or I know there was I know we've just asked for taken applications for a security position that we consolidated to security guards and to make this position to give Fred the support. But there was another position, I believe, a third, like a deputy under the Chief Clark, because originally there were 3 positions. And did we take one of those positions out?
Right. The deputy position is not active. That position is no longer
and so
active.
That's going to be removed from the budget.
Correct.
Okay. And I think that's what my questions were. But I know it's a lot of hard work ahead.
A lot of hard work. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Board Member Schuler. President Sharon Belton-Cotman, you're up next.
Thank you for the presentation. I guess my question is what I always ask. How are we going to make sure that the students who need it the most, that the data is used to make sure that the students who need it the most receive the supports? Currently, and we have not seen a vacancy report, and board members, I think one of the things I'd like to do is implement and request some monthly reports on certain things. Certainly a vacancy report would be one of them. We have not seen a vacancy report in a while. And so my concern is that are we looking into a double whammy situation here? You're not going to fill any vacancies. However, we have schools that traditionally continually have vacancies. And so that's what my concern really is. If you look at prior to COVID, the formula was not equitable prior to COVID. Okay, and so now we're going back in a situation where there's a lot of remedial help is needed in order to get our children back to where they should be. And we're talking about not providing not filling vacancies. And I have a major concern about that, and particularly in the school district that I am, who have consistently had vacancies not filled. And I think, in leveling the playing field, to say that there will be no unbudgeted requests filled, then I want to make sure that this process incorporates making sure that the needs of the students are being incorporated up front and not after the thought, because that's how the unbudgeted requests became a norm, because those schools were not getting what they needed to make it happen. Okay, so I'm interested in looking at the data. I'm also interested in looking at an audit of what is going on in City Hall. Is it necessary that we need as many secretaries? Is it necessary that we need as many people who are in City Hall working behind the scenes? Okay, we're not gonna. I'm very upset about cutting security officers in any capacity in what we're going through, and not making sure, because security officers make sure our children are safe. Okay, cutting 2 on a list of substitutes or whatever, that concerns me, because our security officers always appear to be a shortage in our district. And so those are the things that I am going to be looking at. I am going to make sure that the neediest schools get what they have coming. Now, I feel that there's a definite need for a time audit in City Hall. There are people that rush out of there exactly at 3 o'clock every month, every day of the week or whatever. They are out the door. And then you have people that are sitting there until 5 and 6 at night, trying to make sure their work is done. I want to know how those type of situations exist. And we have not had that done in a long time. We have not had a time audit done in City Hall in a long time. And I'm beginning to think that if we do something like that, we may be able also to save some money on some positions. But I do feel, Superintendent, because the news is already reaching out about this, that there's a need for a statement to go out today in regards to this, because I'm not going to answer the news on this at this point. I have nothing to say. We are at the preliminary stages. There's nothing for me to say. And I don't want to have fear out there, people being afraid and all that other stuff. So let's make sure that a statement goes out in regards to this, and we get in front of this, because my phone has been ringing off the hook with people news people trying to get a statement in regards to this. So it's going to be a story that's going to be run. We need to make sure that our opinion is in there. And I certainly would respectfully ask that it comes out of your office as well as from the CFO office. My final thing I'd like to say is that we knew all the time that we were going to have to do some cuts, okay? But it appears to me that the staff continued to grow anyway. So yes, we hired X amount of people under our ESSER, but we also continue to hire other people, okay? And a lot of the reasons that we're hiring additional people is because the people who are in those positions have not been properly groomed or properly prepared, and they're learning on the job. And as a result of that, we have an assistant helping somebody we need to look at the level of expertise we have. We need to provide professional development for them to get them to the next level, so that we don't have to put people, successively underneath them to make sure that the work is getting done. So these are some of the things I'm going to be looking at, because I think we spent a lot of money on a lot of things, but one thing I do not expect is for our children needs not to be met in those classrooms, period, the end. Okay, and if that means cutting staff in the white collar positions or in City Hall, then that's where it has to start from my perspective, not in the classrooms, especially our CSI, our TSI schools. They need support, and I expect their formula to include that in when it's presented to the board. I really do, since you're doing no unbudgeted requests, which was the equity overlay. Let's not forget that the unbudgeted request was the equity overlay. So like you have schools like City Honors that has 5 instructional coaches. They don't have the disciplinary in issues that another school might have, but nothing was taken into consideration to make sure those schools got instructional coaches. Those are the things that I'm going to be looking at. I'm going to be looking at the equity factors to make sure that all the children get what they have coming to them, and not just some pristine schools getting theirs. Okay, thank you.
I think we're all in agreement, you know, that we want all of our children, you know, whatever school they're at, to be positioned to get the best education that they can
Right,
get.
but what are we going to do with the positions that are not filled already? And you're saying you're not going to fill them. And what are we going to do to make sure that the equity overlays that were in the unbudgeted requests are realized? Those are my questions. I have schools that are CSI, on the verge of becoming a CSI, and I'm looking at making sure that all of our children get what they have coming. But it cannot happen if you're saying, if there's no formula that incorporates that in prior to doing this no unbudgeted request.
I think in meeting with Mr. Barnes and meeting with Ms. Holly McGee, the positions right now that are unfilled for the most part have been unfilled for some time. They've been posted. I don't know, people are not applying for, you know, for the positions. And so rather than to keep the money allocated there right now, we're just looking at, you know, like you shared earlier, we're in the preliminary. This is just, you know, the kickoff really is at January 29th. So we're preliminarily just looking at everything. But at the end of the day, we want to make sure that all of our children, no matter what school they attend, are positioned to not have a decrease in outcomes.
So I want to say this, because this conversation has come up before about these not being able to fill certain positions. Other districts have come out of the box thinking and provided, gotten MOUs with their unions and have been able to bring in instructors from colleges and all sorts of people to make sure that their children's needs are met. I have no understanding why some schools do not have a Spanish teacher for 3 and 4 years. And then all of a sudden the conversation is that position has not been filled for 3 or 4 years. Therefore, we should just go ahead and no. We have to find a method to provide the needs for the children. And that means IT or whatever we have to do, we have to think out of the box in order to get there. And we have not, from my perspective, done what other school districts have done throughout the state to meet the needs of their constituents as far as not being able to fill positions. They have really gone to the universities and things like that to get assistance and to get teach, have professors teach the course to the teachers learn the course, and then they move to the next level. Next year, you don't need a professor to teach the course because the teacher has already learned. And that's what I want to. I don't understand why these positions continue to remain open and that we're not doing anything about them. Thanks.
Dr. Williams, may I answer that?
Sure.
Thank you. So, President Kottman, congratulations to your reelection. We're happy to see that you're back on board with us. But that information that you just shared, that's not true. My staff, Elizabeth Campion, my supervisor of teacher pathways, is working with board member Ann Rivera, and they're working with this transitional G. We're doing a pilot project currently with a school, I believe it's Hilbert or Houghton, I don't remember the name, but one of the schools right now where we're working with transitional G certification so that the professors that are adjunct professors can come and teach in Buffalo Public Schools. So that is underway. They've had 3 meetings. They have a meeting scheduled for this Friday, again with Ann Rivera, to get that underway and going. So when you guys mentioned that to me months ago about everything you say to me as a board, as you direct me, I take heed to it and I share it with my staff, and we strategize on how to do it with efficiency, effectively, and cost effectively. So we're working with the school that board member Dr. Ann Rivera is affiliated with, and we're undergoing that right now. So we're going to be bringing in some professors as teachers in our hard to fill positions, such as world languages in some of our sciences. However, we got to do an interview process because, you know, college professors are different than our K through 12 instructors. So we're just going to do, we're going through that process right now. So you should see where we're going to be engaging with the colleges to bring in these folks to fill these hard to fill positions. In addition to that, I don't believe that it's fair to say that we have not been strategic. We did far and above the hiring that any other school district has done in this local area regarding outreach and recruitment. And it's kind of biting us in the butt. We hired so much this year, so far and so high in the hiring numbers that we now are in a position that we overhired individuals to meet the needs of the ARP-ESSER and the new positions that were available to the schools based on their ability to hire and to add new positions. So we met the needs. We're still short in special ed, so don't get me wrong in that. We want to still, that position, special ed is still up for an opening. That is not one of the positions that the superintendent has directed me to close. So for the public to know, we are still hiring public special ed teachers in our district. However, you know, we did what you asked us to do. We made sure that we hired math teachers. We have no math vacancies in our district. We have no science vacancies in our district. So we did what you guys asked us to do, and we were very strategic about it. And didn't bring in everybody that applied. However, we went to individuals that were seasoned and had experience in the classroom. And we didn't take people from private sector or private schools. We wanted people that worked in public settings with our children that wanted to come and be a part of Buffalo Public Schools. So we strategically brought them in, and it's a strategy move. But, you know, in the long term, you know, we got to be able to keep them, and we want them to stay with us in Buffalo Public Schools. We don't want to give them the wrong message in saying that they may be laid off. We want them to know that they are secure here. They love our children. They've been successful. The complaints and the issues that I've had with teachers have not been with the new teachers. They've been excited. They've been coming in with a lot of vigor and, you know, excited about educating our children. So we've been very, very strategic. So
okay. I'll take that back. You haven't been strategic. What I will say is that when I presented you with an idea that was given to me about what's being done downstate, you did not share with me that were moving it forward. So excuse me for not.
I'm sorry.
But excuse me for not knowing that you were working on something that I had given you an idea on. Okay. Well, and so from my perspective as a board member, there was an option that was put out there, and to the best that I knew, you had not done anything with it, but it had been successful downstate.
Ms. Cotman, anything you tell me to do, I do. So don't even try it. Don't even. All you have to do is give me an idea that is doable, and it's doable for my staff, and it makes sense, and it's going to help our Buffalo Public Schools children. I'm going to do it. So I partnered with Dr. Ann Rivera to do that.
I believe
you were on the train with that young man, and you said you called me on a Saturday afternoon.
Yes, I did.
Yes, and
yes,
so
I did. An IT guy, a guy who had IT experience, was sitting next to me on the train, and he was moving to Buffalo. Yes, I'm always recruiting educators. So my apology if I misspoke, but it was out of ignorance, not because I sincerely believe that the idea did not move forward. Particularly since there are professors at UB that do IT, that do the things that we currently need done at Villa, that we currently need done. So excuse me for not knowing about that. We will accept
applications once this transitional G is off the ground. We just want to take it. You know, we don't want to just leap into it because, you know, and you have said you're very, very passionate and you're very considerate and intentional about who's in front of our children. And most of us have been in a college experience. Not everybody is ready to go in front of pre-K through 12 students.
Yeah, but my understanding is it should be turnkey. That's my understanding, that the purpose for bringing in the professor was to turnkey, that the teacher would continue. Mr. Hurd, we see your hand up. I'm still talking. Thank you. The transitional period would be that they would teach the teacher the course, the curriculum, and then they would leave. Is that still how you're doing it?
No,
because
they
we're
want
not trying to hire professors.
We're working with adjunct professors right now, part-time professors. So Dr. Ann Rivera is like we're going to her as the guru of college professors and what's good to bring into the public schools. So we took advantage of her experience with higher education. And so we tapped into her, and she's been meeting with my team and myself to try to work on getting this off the ground. And it's done. It's coming off the ground right now. So our final meeting is Friday, and we want to try to get those hard to fill positions filled through that avenue. But just know that we're looking at it from an equitable lens. I understand where you're coming from, that you don't want the schools that are struggling, the students are struggling to be the ones that are affected with the loss in instruction with certified teachers. Our data, when we say data driven, it's not about only the enrollment aspect of the classrooms, but it's about what the needs of the students are. So that's why you have HR meeting with finance, because we're bringing in the human aspect of the decision making for the financial, piece for the district. And Dr. Williams has directed me to make sure that the students are not affected by any type of changes that need to take place. So it's not only that she's saying that based on the data that there's only 15 students in a class that could really support 25. She wants to know those 15 students that are in that classroom, what are their needs? What are their issues? What are their behaviors? What are their grades? She's digging into grades with Dr. Ebony Bullock and Laura Samowski-Peters before she makes any type of decisions as to whether or not she's going to be cutting anyone that supports that classroom sustainability. So we're digging in deep. We're digging in super deep, and we're taking a human aspect as well as data. Data matters, because it's got to be done with, efficiency, from a business model, but we're taking the human aspect too, to say there's 15 kids in this classroom. However, these 15 kids are not successful with, X, Y, Z. So we're taking all of those things into consideration. It's not just going to be about the numbers. And so I thank you for bringing that up, President Cotman. But no,
thank you.
I took advantage of what you asked us to do.
Thank you. Thank you. Will that also be made available for other colleges or universities as well once you get it up and running? Okay,
yes, let's take a peek. Let's do a pilot, and then we'll tweak it. You know what I mean? We want to do a pilot first.
Thank you. I appreciate you. Thank you.
Oh, I appreciate you too.
Yeah,
thank you.
It's good. I guess we would not have known as a board had this discussion not taken place. So it's good that whoever's working on these initiatives to be transparent and include the board so that we wouldn't make accusations that aren't, true. So thank you for that conversation. I'm going to go by who hands I saw first. Board Member Shuda, followed by Paulette Woods, and then Terrence Hurd.
Just quickly, I'm wondering, Mr. Barnes, if we will get a preliminary look at our school-based budgets that are coming out for our schools in our districts. Would that be possible?
Absolutely. You can always call me tomorrow, but if you look at that budget calendar, everything is on there, and Maria gets back in town on Monday, but we can get you anything you want.
Okay, great. And then my other question, and this is for Ms. Holly McGee.
I'm sorry, Terry, but
yes?
you'll understand the school-based budget at this time is the template waiting
right.
for the...
Oh, I know that.
Okay.
I know that. And I just want to see, I'd like to take a look. And Ms. McGee, when we hired people, and were they ever told they were hired through the ESSER funds and their positions may be in jeopardy?
To be honest with you, there is a disclaimer that as long as fund is available on all of our, as funding is available for all of our positions, but
not
necessarily told that they were hired
funds.
under ARP ESSER, because some individuals that were hired later in the year, depending on your tenure area, you may have been in the general fund. You may not have been ARP ESSER.
Right. So, but I'm just asking specifically people that were hired under ESSER, because some people came to me and said, well, what do you think about taking a position and if it's under ESSER? And I wasn't like 100% sure they should because of the funding.
I mean, I can give you direct experience. I have a very, very close friend. He's a certified school counselor, right? So he worked for the state for many years, and he's been wanting to get in the field. He worked for me about 20 years ago. And he was like, I really want to take this guidance position with the district, but I'm really concerned that it's going to be ARP ESSER funded. And I don't want to leave my state position to take this ARP ESSER funded position. And I said, I would not advise you to leave your state funded position to go into an ARP ESSER funded position. Everybody knew that these funds were coming from ARP ESSER, and we added these positions. We had some guidance counselors that came on board. Retired Martha Younger was very clear when she interviewed that these were ARP ESSER positions. So not saying that guidance is the one that's going to be affected. We know our kids need guidance and they need social work more than ever than before. But I'm just using him as an example that I made it clear to him that he should probably not leave his state position to join Buffalo Public Schools, which he was anxious to do because he was very effective as a youth counselor with inner city children. And I told him, don't do that.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Board Member Woods?
When you're trying to balance a budget, this question is directed to Mr. Barnes. You have the area of revenue enhancement. We used to have like 10 or 12 projects that financed that, and Jeff listed like 10 or 12 projects that were for revenue enhancements. And I know your staff is doing a lot of projects for revenue enhancements. So can you look at and speak to some of the projects that will increase our revenues? And we also know that the state is not going to be flat. Generally, that's not been the trend for years and years. So that will probably be a revenue enhancement. But the other part, you do revenue enhancements, but you also do cost management and cost reductions. There were some projects on reducing the cost of our fringe benefits, and those were included in our plan so that we could manage the budget. Can you speak to cost management projects and revenue enhancement projects, which will make this a little bit easier for the board?
Great question as usual. I'm glad it was an easy one, especially I did quote you during this presentation tonight. It was a joke. Ms. Woods, if you go back to page, where is it? I'm sorry, page 9 of the presentation. Oh, it's not up. I don't know if you have hard copies, but that's our level 1 budget. Our revenue number is in level 1, $1.085 billion. That includes an estimated $20 million increase in foundation aid from what a report we get called the November database, but it does not include any of our revenue enhancement initiatives. I can send those off to you with a summary, and we may be revising that revenue number to incorporate some of those. We have had quite a bit of success over the past 3, 4, 5 years in those areas. On expenditures, you'll see in the level 1 budget, 1.139. That's 20,000 lines of expenditure code. We're scrubbing every one of those, and that also does not include any projections for expenditure reduction programs. I'm never one to inflate the revenues or decrease the expenditures. It's the worst thing you can do for financial planning, but your questions are right on. We're working on both those areas, and neither are reflected in this level 1 deficit. But I can report that out to you.
I think that will be helpful for the board because as the other board members have pointed out, we have to maintain academic achievement. We have to have a focus on the student body and the people in the classrooms, and we have to maintain the equity portion so that the least of our children have teachers. Thank you so much, Tammy, for filling the math and science teacher programs, the positions that our parents have been crying out for. But we have to maintain that the neediest students do get the push because that's what the superintendent's goals are steered at. So thank you. I hope you'll send something to the entire board on the revenue enhancements and the cost containment. Thank you.
Thank you, Board Member Woods. Board Member Terrence Hurd, you're up next.
Thank you, Chairwoman, Dr. Kathy Evans-Brown. Just like to say a couple things. I really like to say, first of all, Dr. Williams, Tammy Holly McGee. I know we have Antoinette Amos on board working very hard with the DEI. I'd just like to say that I know this district has really took a hard look and a hard dive into our programs with the district and seeing, what can we do to make at the board and working with the board in so many different capacities, trying to, understand what our stakeholder needs are and what the district needs are, and especially our children. So I'll just, first of all, like to personally thank you for all the work that you guys have done. This past year has been amazing. The body of work that's been put forward and the challenges that we have is nobody could get a true understanding of all the challenges, especially when we're dealing with the hardships that our children face and our teachers face, within the classroom. So I'd like to just personally thank you, first of all, for the work that you guys are doing. Second, Dr. Ann Rivera isn't here right now, but she has this speak to me about the programs that she's been working on, and I myself been working on similar programs. So I would just like to say, Dr. Ann Rivera, working her capacity as a board member at large, she's doing an outstanding job trying to help this district in many different ways, which was going to be presented to the board upon successful meetings. So she's been working very hard, as other board member at large members has been working also on things that's for the district. We work with the administrative staff members directed by the superintendent, and if something seemed to be plausible or something that's seen that may be able to work, it gets presented to the district. And the board, yes, we meet with the board, we talk over different items or different things that we're doing. So I'll just, since Ann isn't here, Dr. Rivera isn't here right now, that's out on family matters, just like to say that she is working and she has met with me and others about this opportunity, and we are also working with other schools and other colleges about opportunity, how to grow our district. So we would love to have that meeting soon, and once we're able to get some information, move forward, we can continue on. So just thank you again, and thank you for the hard work that this administrative staff and Mr. Barnes, just the dedication that you have since you took on this role in this position, and informing us and working through all the challenges. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Any other board members' comments? I don't see any other hands. With that, James Barnes, thanks again for your renowned presentation, as always. I'm going to send it back to you, Tanya Williams, Dr. Williams, to close this out.
Hey, I want to thank you, Chairwoman Dr. Kathy Evans Brown, and Board President and all board members for recognizing the hard work. It's a lot of work. We're managing many, many, many moving parts, and any change in any of those parts will certainly have some impacts. And so I certainly want to give a shout out to Chief Barnes and his team, but also to all of our cabinet members, all of our principals. It's a lot of work and our support staff, the clerical staff included. About a year ago, we were having lots of delays with processing, overtime, and all of that. And, Mr. Barnes really kind of took that bull by the horn. And, I'm not getting the same concerns. So Ebony Bullock's team is doing a knockout job, making sure that there's training. There's so many good things that are happening right now. And the staff, it may seem like, we have 50 cabinet. We don't. We really don't. It's a small cabinet, and they work really, really hard. And we're going to continue to do that. And I appreciate when the board recognizes the hard work that this team puts in. So thank you, Chief Barnes, and thank you, Cabinet. Thank you, board members. Have a good night. Again, Happy New Year. If you are down here, be safe going home. I'm looking outside. It's looking like it's a little nasty outside. So
Yes.
thank you.
Nasty.
Good meeting.
All right. Good night.
Good night, everyone. Thank you.
All right.
Good night, everybody.
All right.
Happy New Year's, everyone. Everyone,
Happy New Year.
Well, I tried.
Happy New Year.
All right.
Drive safely.